The following is fact number 28 from my article entitled "The Facts Speak for Themselves." The 9/11 report was and is promoted as a triumph. The Washington Post reported that it is, quote, "a useful analysis of the changes that have taken place since, as well as the changes that have not taken place," end quote, and calling the Commission's unanimity and comprehensiveness, quote, "impressive," end quote. WAPO also reported that, quote, "the final report is a document of historic sweep and almost unprecedented detail, offering the sort of examination of a highly classified subject that customarily would not be possible for decades after the fact. From the findings of spy agencies to the tactics of fighter pilots, from the conversations of heads of state to the verbatim text of secret presidential briefings, this is the government laid bare," end quote. The New York Times reported that it was, quote, "uncommonly lucid, even riveting," end quote, and is an, quote, "improbable literary triumph," end quote. Time magazine said the report was, quote, "meticulous in its reconstruction of the attacks and unflinching in its conclusions about why the government failed to stop them," end quote. The 9/11 Commission's report was nominated by the National Book Foundation in 2004 for Best in Nonfiction. Former Representative Katherine Harris referred to the 9/11 report as, quote, "one of the most important publications of our age," end quote. Senator Hillary Clinton said the 9/11 Commission's report was, quote, "a great testimony to their willingness to search hard for the truth, to get at the facts," end quote. Senator Charles Schumer said the 9/11 Commission did a, quote, "incredible job," end quote. In 2004, Bush's presidential campaign said, quote, "the Commission's report makes the case for the policies that U.S. President Bush has been pursuing in the war on terror and eliminates any doubt that the best defense against the threat of global terror is a strong offense," end quote. Bush said, quote, "I agree with their conclusion that the terrorists were able to exploit deep institutional failings in our nation's defenses that developed over more than a decade," end quote. A different kind of praise for the 9/11 report has come in the form of requests for, quote, 9/11 type commissions, end quote, for other horrible events in America's history, such as Katrina and the recent, quote, "financial crisis," end quote. That is the end of fact number 28. The 9/11 report was sold to the United States and to the world as the most comprehensive investigation we could have gotten. That is simply not the case. I call it a blatant lie. I could find some statements from individuals within the 9/11 Commission to counter that claim, but instead, I am going to read for you some quotes from the September 11th advocates. Quote, "The fact that the Commission did not see fit to tie up all loose ends in their final report or to hold those who came before them accountable for lying and or making misleading statements puts into question the veracity of the entire Commission's report. Individuals who came before the Commission to testify after NORAD's appearance had no reason to state the truth. It was abundantly clear that there would be no repercussions for any misrepresentations. Furthermore, the lack of tenacity and curiosity by the commissioners themselves to determine why NORAD had deceived them is unconscionable. Knowing full well that the lack of military response was such a critical failure begs the question of whether that same lack of tenacity and curiosity was applied to other critical areas of the 9/11 investigation." End quote. Quote, "At the 9/11 Commission hearings, little actual evidence was ever produced. Many individuals were not sworn in, critical witnesses were either not called to testify or were permitted to dictate the parameters of their own questioning, pertinent questions were omitted, and there was little follow-up. Whistleblower testimony was suppressed or avoided altogether. The National Security Agency, an intelligence agency that is responsible for the collection and analysis of foreign communications and foreign intelligence, was barely investigated at all. With the narrative of the 9/11 Commission's final report predetermined, and with the pre-existing intention to never hold anyone accountable in place, the 9/11 Commission was doomed to fail as a real investigation. The end result of the 9/11 Commission's work was that some of the recommendations that they produced were in fact based on distortions and omissions. Since their mandate of a complete accounting was ignored, the recommendations were incomplete at best. There was clearly no desire on the part of Congress to force the Commission to meet its legislative mandate. Accordingly, there were no repercussions for the fact that the investigation and its recommendations were incomplete. It could be surmised that holding no one accountable was more important than uncovering and disclosing the truth. This could compromise the future safety of American citizens. End quote. Quote, why, when this congressionally mandated commission could have done much to fix the fatal flaws in our government by conducting a real investigation and making vital recommendations, would they instead allow it to become a sham? This investigation was meant to fix the loopholes that allowed our country to be so vulnerable. Why would they choose instead to succumb to political machinations? What would we find out if a real investigation into September 11, 2001 were ever done? The bottom line is that the most deadly attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor remains dangerously unexamined. This can only be remedied with an investigation guided by the facts and conducted outside the reach of those with a vested interest in suppressing the truth. End quote. The 9/11 families deserve justice, and by that I mean they deserve the whole truth, and they deserve to see everyone responsible for the 9/11 attacks tried for their crime. That is a simple truth. The 9/11 history needs to be accurately told and understood by everyone so that it no longer can be used to kill people, occupy countries, and take our civil liberties away. That is also a simple truth.